Hello friends, welcome to the MARE Podcast. Before we get started, you can find our podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and YouTube. Don't forget that you can find more about the MARE project at www.marehamburg.com, and you can support the project and this podcast through Patreon. All the links are in the description. Enjoy! Excellent. It's great to be back for another episode of the MARE Podcast. Today, I have the pleasure of having Judith Gott with me here. Hello, Judith.
Hi. Thank you for having me. I'm
Of
good.
course.
I'm good.
It's a pleasure to have you here. It's a pleasure to have, actually, I don't know how, this is a coincidence. Actually, this is actually a coincidence, but you, the second episode, you're the second committee member of MARE, and if all goes well, the third episode would be the three remaining committee members of MARE, you, Alex, and Maurice. So let's start by talking about that for a bit. When did you join MARE?
So just a small precision. Before me, there were other MARE members in 2020, which organized the first conference. I don't remember all the names, so not to make any mistakes, I'll just leave it. You can go and check it on the MARE website to get to know the people. But I joined in 2022, I think, end of 2022 or beginning of 2023. It was, we met with Maurice in a conference in Malta. It was actually under the Mediterranean too. And Maurice was thinking that MARE was becoming a bit stagnant in some way, if we could say that word. And they were thinking of abandoning like the whole project. And I was like, no, this is great. You should keep on doing what you're doing, because it's like the only platform for the time being that any student of a master level or a PhD or even a degree level to present something or to ask for information or to get in touch with people very easily. So in the end, they invited me to join them. And since then, I've been part of the team, which it was really a great opportunity to basically continue in this project of building this network and platform that we have. I think maybe we have more, and over 400 people that we reach currently. But I think the number went higher with time.
I think the last estimate, the last head count that I did was about 650.
So that's
we're up
huge. And the fact that we have gained this as a team and as a MARE platform, this kind of recognition from people that even are like established in academia, and that they see what we're doing and what is our objective. And that was really, really nice. And actually now we're happy that we have other people joining and giving that opportunity for others to continue the work, which is you, Juan, and Nikos.
Oh yeah,
so we're
absolutely.
very happy.
It's a brilliant experience being part of MARE and seeing and feeling like you're helping, like you're doing something and someone gets benefit from what you're doing. It's absolutely brilliant. So let's just mention something. You talked about the conference in Malta. The conference was not under the Mediterranean. The title was under the Mediterranean. Yeah.
Yes.
You were not underwater. Because someone might not know. You said in a way, yes, we're at a conference under the Mediterranean. The title of the conference is under the Mediterranean. And I think it's a conference named after the first publication of Honor Frost, right?
Exactly.
It's funded by the Honor Frost Foundation. You are talking about Honor Frost, you are an Honor Frost scholar for your PhD and your master's, right?
Yes, it's been since 2019, since September of 2019, when I started my master's. I've had the Honor Frost Foundation basically supports and having my back, because I think it's a reality that everyone who is studying, you need financial support, either that you have to work on your own, or you have a scholarship. And I was very lucky to have the Honor Frost Foundation to support my my master's and also my PhD right now. So
Oh yeah, it wasn't all about luck, of course. You're absolutely brilliant and smart, and you thoroughly well deserve the scholarship. But I want to ask a kind of I don't want to I want to say a cliche question. I don't know if you were asked this before, but what does it mean for you that the foundation that supports your studies is named after a maritime archaeologist, and more specifically, a woman maritime archaeologist?
oh well, I mean, there have been some discussions. Basically, there was a roundtable discussion, I think, a year or 2 years ago, and the Honor Frost, where they were talking about women in maritime archaeology. And it is, I mean, I think my generation were very lucky as women to have much more, let's say, opportunities and equality in the space. We're still, I believe, we still have work to do on that subject, but we're in a good path. But having the foundation as and the main picture as a woman, I think it's very bold in some way and encouraging, because I mean, Honor Frost as a persona was like someone who had very progressive ideas, and as a person herself was a progressive person. The fact of let's fund local people, like people from Cyprus, people from Lebanon, people from Syria, to do the work instead of we Westerners to go to Cyprus to do the job for them. So I find that it's very inspiring in some way to have to have this woman. And in some way the story of Honor Frost is also very much personal to me, because it's like, uh, if I'm not mistaken, she was born in Cyprus and then raised in Malta. Well, I'm the opposite. I was born in Malta, raised in Cyprus. So it's kind of very, I feel it's very kind of personal in some way without having any personal connection with this person. But I find it's kind of beautiful in that way.
It's brilliant. It touches your heart, really. It's so inspiring. But since we talk about Oren Frost and fundings and studies, so how about you tell us what you're doing with your life right now? At what stage in your life are you?
Well, I'm in the stage of finishing my PhD.
Oh my God.
In a couple of months, it should be submitted. So it's the grand finale, I like to call it, or the
Yeah.
marathon.
It's some would say it's the end of a long, long journey, while others would say it's closer to the beginning of a new journey.
I think it depends
Which
where you are. I think it
yeah,
depends
that's
where
my
you
question.
are.
Where are you? Are you
I
in the
think
end of the journey or ready for the beginning of the new journey
I'm
ahead?
at the end of the journey, and I think once you submit, you see that okay, this is the beginning of a new journey. But right now, I'm not
Hmm.
there yet.
Oh, you're not
Uh,
there yet. Well, I hope you are there soon, or whenever you
yes.
feel like you're ready to be there. So what do you research about? Since you're in the last kind of stages of your PhD, I'd imagine you're sick of it by now, or not?
No, actually, I've said, I mean, I've said this to multiple people that actually
Oh,
it's
so you're
not
talking
that
to
bad.
multiple people, not only me. Okay.
Ah, well, Yorgos, there are many other people. It's not just you.
Excellent.
But like with colleagues in the office, because like I'm lucky enough to have like an office full of other 5, 6 PhD students that work, and they are all in different levels of their PhD. And it's actually writing is fun. Actually, I enjoy it. It gets frustrating when you have to do all the small editing or doing the boring catalog work, like of putting things in order. But the writing itself, I find it very creative. So I don't I I mean, it's stressful, yes, to get it done on time and to follow the schedule, but I really like when you write a page and ideas come up and you're like, ooh, this is good material, or bravo, you thought of that. Like I find it, I really, I don't hate writing. So even though I may not be the best writer ever or the best communicator in writing, I do enjoy it. So far, I'm not hating my subject so far, but we'll talk in a few months.
If you're not hating it by now, I don't think you will. But you're right. It's a creative process. You
Yeah.
create basically.
Yes. Yes.
And it's a piece of art, it's a piece of work, even though we may talk about academia being stagnant and boring, and we write in a certain way that it's very professional and very strict. At the same time, you are trying to basically put a whole lot of ideas into one single unit and present it in a way that it's both fulfilling to you and understandable to someone else, which is
Yeah.
a wonderful thing to do. And I believe every PhD student or author would be able to approve of that message. So, what are you writing about? What are you
Yeah,
doing?
I kept everything in suspense. It took a couple of
Yeah, yeah,
minutes to
absolutely.
say. So, so basically, my PhD, I was quite lucky to kind of develop the PhD from my master thesis, my master dissertation, and the idea was that from this masters, I kind of understood that there's a lack of study on the subject of harbor construction techniques prior to prior to the Roman period. So let's say classical Hellenistic archaic, starting from the archaic to the Hellenistic period. So for those who may not know where we're talking about, since I'm working on the Eastern Mediterranean, by the way.
Which is what's the Eastern Mediterranean for you?
So for me, as a region that I define in the PhD, it starts from Greece and then goes to Turkey, go down the Levantine coastline, and to Egypt and Cyprus. That's where is my Eastern Mediterranean, if I could put it like that. And from the bibliographical research, which was my master's basically, I really understood that we talk about harbor structures before the Roman period, before Building for Eternity, as the book of Brandon, that they wrote this huge book, amazing, where they described all the construction techniques that they could identify in the entire Mediterranean. What was concerning is that we use very general terms to describe harbor structures, and as if they are very easy and not complicated at all. And that kind of intrigued me a lot. And so I decided that I would do a PhD on that subject, on trying to see how can we define a harbor construction technique and a harbor structure that is dated between the classical and the Hellenistic period. So the classical period, it starts. Every region has its own chronological framework. So let's say in the Levant, it starts somewhere around the 6th century BC. But like in the rest of the Eastern Mediterranean, mainly it's around the 5th. And then it goes up to let's say, the Battle of Actium, which that is like a symbolic, very important event, which shows, let's say, the permanent presence of the Romans in the Eastern Mediterranean. Of course, the Romans were present much earlier, but they established, let's say, themselves clearly after that battle. So that in my time frame, it's, let's say, from the 5th century BC up till the 1st century BC, and trying to understand how harbor structures, and by harbor structures many people get like their idea of, so you study the storage house, warehouses, slipways, breakwaters, moles. In my PhD, I defined harbor structures as a very specific category, which is all harbor structures are structures that are built in water, and their main aim is to define the harbor basin, define and protect the harbor basin. So a slipway, for instance, is a structure that facilitates the further function of a harbor basin. It doesn't protect the harbor basin and the ships inside. I mean, it protects, of course, but it's not the primary, let's say, element that protects the ship.
Yeah, and
There's first the
what is a
breakwater.
sleepway? Do you want to explain to us what is a slipway?
Oh, so a slipway, you can imagine a ramp that we have, I mean, in different spaces in public buildings, or also in the beach sometimes, where you have boats being towed to shore. So that's a slipway. It's basically a ramp, which sometimes we call them also ship sheds, because they have also a structure that protects them with a roof and a colonnade. So it's and it was used basically for ships for naval for triremes, for naval battle ships, to store them in order to keep them lightweight, so that they don't suck the water. If we could use that word.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. So it's something that we find in every harbor, slipways, or is it something
yes,
that we find in
and not
every harbor?
all, not
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 all.
not all harbors. Sorry, not all harbors. Slipways. No, I was thinking that you was going to say breakwaters, or no,
Oh no, no,
no,
I'm going to go to the topic of breakwaters. So
no, no,
breakwaters, we find them everywhere.
no either. I
No,
mean,
not that either.
there are varieties of harbor structures that could be built, and this is the second part of my PhD of why certain harbor structures and certain construction techniques are built in a specific site. But before I go there, I just wanted to clarify that no,
Yes.
slipways and harbor structures in general, they are not everywhere. They are not a must to have a harbor. You can sometimes have a harbor simply, which in that case we call it then an anchorage, simply by natural features like islets, promontories that create a protected space for ships. So you don't really need a basin, a protected basin. You don't always need a harbor structure to have a protected basin. So if that's clear for
Oh
you.
yeah, of course, that makes absolute sense. I think everyone, even if you've never seen a harbor in your life, you can imagine how a harbor can be structured and how a harbor cannot be structured and
Yes.
be, because of its natural features, be an anchorage and people just anchoring there. So this does not only have to do with the natural features of an area. I'd imagine that larger cities and larger settlements, and we talk about the classical and Hellenistic eras, we talk about the eras of empires and the eras where
Yes.
the armies and the navies were getting massive. So I'd imagine that harbors became kind of a necessity to facilitate and help all those large and vast navies that were conducting war day in, day out. So I'd imagine that does it change due to the political change in the area, or is it just something so standard that they just don't bother changing it throughout the classical and Hellenistic era?
I'm so happy you asked that question.
Really?
Yes, because one of
Why?
one because one of the, let's say, missions that I in the PhD I write objectives, but it was really for me a mission like to really try and understand based on what we have published so far, what how construction techniques have developed through time. And to do that, you really need to understand the larger picture, not just the construction from an architecture point of view of the construction of the structure, but also on the historical context. As you're saying, it's a time of empires and how this changes. So one thing that really kind of struck me from collecting all this data is when we enter the Hellenistic period, which there is, of course, a change in the political status, political organization of the region, which from polis, Greek polis or city states or small kingdoms, we start having empires, and empires that are in conflict with each other. We have the Seleucids, the Ptolemies, the Antigonids, which are going one after the other, and frontiers that change constantly.
Yeah, and
And
these all
actually,
are, we need to clarify that these are the successors of Alexander, right?
exactly,
So Alexander
sorry,
dies
yes,
in 323 BC, and his large and vast empire just fractures into pieces, and everyone gets a piece of the pie, and
exactly,
then all the successors just join into conflict constantly on the Hellenistic era. So yes, sorry to
exactly.
interrupt you. Continue.
Yes, and so basically through this time, what kind of seemed interesting is to see that we do not have anymore the polis that is funding, or we start seeing not only polis funding harbor works, but also these these personalities, which are kind of basilis as they pronounce themselves later on, that are funding these kind of projects. And this factor, I think it's this change is interesting because we start seeing at that time, not only, let's say, bigger harbors with much more, let's say, this change in volume and this change in further including the harbor structures in the fortification and including the harbor in the warfare. Basically, what we see also is what we could call small experiments that start appearing in harbor construction. And of course, to as a disclaimer, small experiments happened throughout the entire, let's say, history of harbor development. It was not only in the Hellenistic period that suddenly we have people experimenting in water, but I really think that in the Hellenistic time, that was really kind of a risky place with very ambitious people that wanted to leave a mark of their reign. So they ventured into investing in these kind of constructions, and that's kind of brings me to my case study, which I'm very happy to say that we've worked in Amathus together, both of
Oh
us.
yes, we did. Yes, we did.
And
Yeah. As a disclaimer, me and Judith have known each other for quite some time now. Yes. As a disclaimer, I should have said that in the beginning. I forgot.
yes.
Yes. Continue.
And Amathus is a harbor in the south central coast of Cyprus. For those who don't know, it is currently it's the first accessible underwater archaeological park of the island. So if you ever happen to be in Cyprus, please go. It's fascinating. It's not just because I love Amathus for my own personal reasons. It is fascinating.
No, I can
And
absolutely vouch for that.
yeah,
There's the archaeological site up on the hill, and then you can take a swim, literally a swim with a snorkel, a mask, goggles, and see the harbor structures
exactly.
underwater. It's a wonderful experience that I think. Can you see that anywhere else in the Eastern Mediterranean? Is there any such cases, such shallow depths that are you can visit them, and there's all this underwater like explanation tablets underwater, right? They're still there.
Yes, yes. Well, they're still there. I mean, there are sites. There's, for instance, Pavlopetri in Greece,
Is
which
that
is
can you visit that?
yes, you can visit
Oh,
that. And they
wonderful.
have recently, I think 2 years ago, the M.A.R.E had installed some underwater signs, basically. There's also Caesarea Marittima, but I don't know how accessible it is to non-divers, if I'm not mistaken. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't remember how deep that is.
Me
Yes.
neither, me neither. But I know I've seen that there are like diving clubs that take people there, but I don't know what depths are we talking about exactly and where
Hmm.
exactly they take the people.
Okay,
So
that's interesting to see. So, just as a disclaimer, Pavlo Petri is a submerged settlement of the Bronze Age, and I
yes,
think there's some wonderful documentaries about it. And I
yes,
think
very impressive ones.
the archaeological publication, I think, is yet to be released, if
I'm
I'm
not
not
sure.
mistaken.
I'm not
Like the
sure.
book, I think it's yet to be released, but there are wonderful documentaries, and people can search for Pavlo Petri and see how they found this Bronze Age settlement submerged into the water, which is wonderful. But anyway, running back to the harbours and Amathus, you were telling us about the case study of Amathus. Can you
Yes.
elaborate on that? Yeah.
So basically, my PhD is on different levels. So you have to kind of see the PhD is like I'm a bird and I'm flying, and then I am tired and I just want to land somewhere. And I decided to land in Amathus. So me flying around was flying all over the Mediterranean and seeing what harbor structures do we have, what kind of construction techniques do we have. And then I chose Cyprus, which is an island that is very close to heart for me, but also it's super interesting for when someone comes to study specifically classical and Hellenistic harbor structures, because most of the island's harbor structures have been dated to this period basically. So Amathus is one of them, and I am very lucky, and I think Cyprus is very lucky to have one of the best preserved harbor sites in the Eastern Mediterranean. I think also we can say in the Mediterranean, the level of preservation is outstanding. And the fact that at the time when I started my PhD, there was the Andicat project which was going on, which the idea was to open the site to public, and they've done some fascinating work by doing their first underwater photogrammetries of Amathus Harbour. So far, in the 2017 publication of the excavation, because this site was excavated in the 1980s by the French school at Athens. And this kind of work in 2022, really, 2021, 2022, really pushed our knowledge further by complementing the publication and the work that was conducted in the 80s. So I was lucky enough to start the PhD during a time where people were working in Amathus, and I was able to access the data. So I would really like to thank the team from the University of Cyprus, from the Technical University of Cyprus, that have provided all the data and shared it so that we could restart, or in some way, or restart this scientific research on a very specific subject, on how do we construct harbor structures during this time. And since Amathus is dated during this period and is considered to have been built by one of the sons of the successors of Alexander the Great, Dimitrios Poliorkitis, the son of Antigonos. It was really a great case study to see how, with this change of, let's say, status, of political status, when you have not anymore a local power which is permanently there, but now you have shifting powers on the island, how that changes or opens up the possibilities of development in harbor construction. And that's something that we see in Amathus. And it's one possibility out of the many possibilities that could have been chosen. And it's quite impressive to see that how this ambition and really drive to establish themselves in the region led to these kind of constructions, not only harbor structures, but many different types of constructions in architecture, which you see all over the Eastern Mediterranean and in Cyprus.
Wonderful, yeah, and you have to, just to reiterate that, you need to understand that. Let's talk about Cyprus for a minute. I think that before Alexander, Cyprus was fragmented into some certain amount of different kind of, the, may call it city states, some call it city states, some call it small countries within the country.
Yes.
And they started basically after with Alexander the Great. That was the first time that Cyprus became kind of united under one ruler, and that
Yes,
was, I think,
exactly.
that started happening in 333, if I'm not mistaken. So after that, for the first time, Cyprus was under one ruler, and that ruler, which did not only rule Cyprus, it ruled a whole bunch of places around Cyprus, and Cyprus, including Cyprus, chose to invest in harbors and chose to leave their names imprinted on harbors. And that even more emphasizes how important harbors were, how much of a lifeline it was to, because we talk about a time that there was no planes, and for an island as is Cyprus, there was no other way to reach Cyprus other than by boat.
No,
And
no.
but everything that needed to come into Cyprus, the merchants and commerce and armies and people coming in and out and communication with the outside world, harbors were absolutely crucial into maintaining that communication with the rest of the world, really. And it's absolutely fascinating to see how important it is. And I think if some people take our advice and go and do a swim in Amathus and have this in mind, I think it gives you goosebumps just to think how much of how important those structures were
It's
in Cyprus, but also all over the Mediterranean, as it turns out. So let's. I know this may be a bad idea, but how about we get a little bit technical and you tell us what's so special about Amathus, about the construction in Amathus, about the harbor construction, other than the history behind it, of course. Is there anything in
okay.
its structural elements that's special?
So before I go there, I mean, the idea that Amathus was built by Dimitrios Poliorkitis. It is the most, let's say, prevailing theory, but there are people who question it if it was indeed Dimitrios Poliorkitis, if it was probably Ptolemy. But that's the most prevailing and the most, let's say, confident um, argument that we've had so far in the archaeological discussion. But going now back to what is so special about Amathus, it is a site that, for multiple reasons, it is very unique in the island, but not only in the island, in the rest of the Eastern Mediterranean. So if you ever get to swim in Amathus, which I hope some of you will do, what you will see for sure is the huge, enormous breakwater, which I'm going to use the term breakwater for simplicity reasons, because if I have to go very technical, I'm afraid some of you may get lost. But in the PhD, I kind of proposed the term of a horizontally composite breakwater, which is very much not pleasant to listen, but it's very, very explicatory of what it is. And in harbor engineering today, that's a term that we use today, because Amathus harbor structure, which is the breakwater in the southernmost part of the harbor, is a harbor structure that was the only one so far built at that time. The only horizontally composite breakwater built at that time. We have multiple types of breakwaters, just to explain, multiple forms of breakwaters. In archaeology, one of the problems is that we use a lot the term breakwater, but breakwater could be many different forms of breakwaters. There are many categories. And in antiquity, we have two prevailing types, which is the mound breakwater, which is a spill of rubble, which, as in the PhD, I try to convince my readers, is that it's not just throwing boulders and whatever stones you have in the sea. It's a very well thought process, and it's a layering of different sizes of stones, but that we'll maybe talk about another time. And then you have the composite breakwater, which is, again, you have that rubble mound, which on top you have on top or on one of the sides, usually it's the leeward side, the side that looks towards the shore, you have an area where you can walk, which is usually ashlar. Today it's concrete. And it provides a space where you can anchor, people can walk, people can load and goods, unload or load goods on ships, on boats. So it's there are different types of breakwaters, and Amathus presents this horizontal composite breakwater, which you have to imagine. You have a huge of around 180 meters of a row of headers of blocks of ashlar blocks, simply placed one after the other in a one line. And then on the seaward side, the side that is looking towards the sea, you have this spill of rubble. And this is the first time we're seeing this type of construction ever. What we see it appear again in the Roman times, but in the classical Hellenistic times, we have no such example. And it's the first time we have this kind of experiment, because to be an innovation, it means that in the end, it's going to be immediately, in one way, adapted by the rest of the community that builds harbors, we could put it like that. And that's not the case. It reappears in a different way in Caesarea Maritima in the Roman times. And today, if you see the harbors all over the world, you have multiple times horizontally composite breakwaters like in Amathus. So it's really the first seed in order to have this kind of structure. And it's super impressive. I find it very, even though it was built in a time that it was totally unstable, there was still time to invent things and experiment with things, and of course then get lost in time. But they were there, they thought of it, even though it was considered a time which was very unstable for the island, because of course, as you said earlier, we have these separate states, the separate kingdoms that stopped existing gradually, and that created an instability, of course, in change maybe, but change could be also good, and that's what we see.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned something very important, that and I think this is useful for nowadays as well, for the present day and for the future, that whatever is going on in the world, the people, they will not just sit with their hands tied and do nothing. The people will be creative, will find solutions, will move forward and try and make their lives better and make their lives more sophisticated. So I think there is a very important aspect in Amathus, that even though the wars were going on back and forth and people were off to fight wars that they didn't maybe not even cared about, we still see people being creative and being ready to build and experiment, which I think it's worth talking about, really.
I think it talks about today a lot of what we see. I mean, this is not something in let's say we see only in harbor structures. We see it from art to religion in different aspects of society in antiquity. That through times that we consider them as politically unstable or problematic, or you still people find ways. And I think it's a message for us also in one way or another, that we can create, we can go forward in our way, even though it will not last. Maybe in time it will reappear magically at some point again in another context. But I think it's a beautiful way of seeing things. Otherwise, I think it's not very hopeful, the message for today.
Of course. Yeah, it's yeah. We can always be realistic but hopeful, right?
Yes.
I'm not saying that we should live in our fantasy worlds that everything is
No, no, not at
perfect
all, not at all, not
and
at all.
don't care about anything except creating and doing whatever we want. We should always be aware and like have a
Exactly.
stance on things, but at the same time, we know that life moves forward. Really, life, it cannot stop, and people cannot just stop living because something is going wrong. And it's a wonderful message to communicate to the outside world. Oh yeah, you left me speechless. That was beautiful, and I hope you add this to your PhD or some paper somewhere, sometime. Someone will hear it other than in this podcast. So we've talked about your research, and you mentioned that you actually did field work in Amathus. You did field work. Did you do any other field work that except in Amathus? Did you go anywhere else for your PhD or not?
Well, for my PhD, because it's a huge geographical area, I of course visited all the sites in sites in Cyprus to have an idea. I've done also a survey in Paphos, a very brief one, in the harbor of Paphos. But fieldwork, the majority is bibliographical research. So in order to collect all the data from all over the Eastern Mediterranean. But I worked also in Egina, in the Egina Harbour City project, which is located on the island of Egina, and it's been going on since 2019. And it's a naval harbour of the classical period, which not only of the classical, it goes even earlier in the archaic times too. So that's the, let's say, my only harbor experiences that I've had so far.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Would you like to have done more, but logistically or maybe financially, it was impossible to do?
Of course, I mean, who would say no to fieldwork? But then you have to be realistic about the time and the time it gets to basically then process the entire data. So I decided that I will do one season of fieldwork, which was a good taste of what fieldwork looks like when you are organizing it and really like dealing with managing a group and people and all the problems that can come up during a survey. And but yeah, I would definitely would have loved to do more
Oh yeah.
fieldwork. I
So
would lie.
talk to us a bit about that. What's the difficulty in organizing field work in archaeology? What is the things you have to take into consideration, like the most important things?
Well, I was very lucky, to be honest, because I've had great, amazing support from both universities that I am doing my PhD with, Aix-Marseille and the University of Cyprus. So For instance, I didn't, because I got the permit of the very last minute, and I had to find budget in order to pay people to come and travel, and to basically to finance the entire project. And there wasn't at that time a European project called Neanias, which was had funding for field work in order to experiment with underwater photogrammetries. So we used Amathus as a case study, and we could finance part of that mapping that we did in Amathus. Then, of course, it's a lot of we don't really understand that, I think, in archaeology, and it's only when you get into that role you're not just being a person, you're not just being an archaeologist at the time and a diver, or doing, let's say, drawings underwater, but you're also doing a bit human resources, like people's problems that you need to respect, people's limits that you need to respect. You need to be a good communicator. You need to think of all the personal issues that can exist in a space, all the logistics that come with, like, things that you need with you every day in order not to waste the time to going back and forth. So it's a lot of organizing and good communication, I believe, and above all. And then you are an archaeologist, and then you are a diver.
Wow. So
But
it's
first,
really it's a team sport, isn't it?
yes, definitely. I mean, without a team, archaeologists are nothing, in my opinion. So I think we should always acknowledge the fact that every individual who's doing research, he or she or they are backed with a huge amount of people that are working with them, are supporting them financially or in logistically on the site. So it's super important.
Yeah, which of course begs the question: what if somebody isn't from EU and can benefit from EU funding, and what if
Oh,
someone doesn't have the support from their home institution, and that
that's
creates
very hard.
a whole cycle of, yes, of course it's not our fault, yes, of course we're barely getting by, we can fund other excavations, but some parts of the world are still unknown because there's really no resources in order
Exactly.
to help them improve their archaeological knowledge. But saying that, I really want to hear your opinion, because I think you're a very bright person and smart. So
Come
I
on.
really want to hear your opinion on, some would say, right? I just said that some parts of the world we can't have archaeology because archaeology is expensive. Some would say it's a luxury, right? And someone would say opposite me and say, but we don't need archaeology. Why, if people like don't have food and don't have clothes and are struggling to get by, should care about their archaeology? And I think that doesn't only apply, as you can understand, to areas that don't have archaeology. This applies to areas that have archaeology as well, where people are questioning, why do we do archaeology? Why do we spend so much money in excavating and, quote unquote, turning rocks upside down and dusting off old ceramics? Why do we do it? What, for you? Like, what is your opinion? Why do we do archaeology?
Well, I'm going to be honest, because it is a
Good, good.
question. It is a question that many times when I'm writing, and I am enjoying writing, but then when you see what's happening in the world, you just realize that what you're doing is a luxury. And archaeology, it started as a luxury. I mean, it was a very elitist hobby, which now became into a science, and in some way continues to be a luxury. Also, to be an archaeologist, the amount of years of investing in studying and the need of paying to study, I consider myself very lucky because I've never had to pay a penny for a master or for a PhD. But not everyone has that opportunity, not because they are not bright, or because there are no opportunities, as you said earlier. And we, both of us, I think we had opportunities, and some regions don't. So to answer your question, like, why how if archaeology is useful, that was your question. If I
I mean,
in
the
some
the
way.
question is vague because I wanted to see how you would take it, but you went there to, is archaeology useful? So maybe you can answer that. Yeah, is
Yeah,
archaeology
well,
useful? Why is
well,
it?
I mean, if you see what's happening right now, like if, as you said, like if I go right now to Gaza, and I look into what's happening, and people probably it's the last thing that they will consider. Well, let's protect our heritage. Or sometimes when there was this war in Syria going on, people were talking about Palmyra, but who was talking about the EU sanctions, for instance, on the Syrian people that wanted perhaps to leave more easily their country, and they couldn't, so they had to take boats to cross the sea because there were no planes traveling from and to Syria. So of course people will not care about Palmyra or will not care about any archaeological site. So I think archaeology in some way, because it has been and it's still in some way a luxury, it kind of covers up the reality, like what is most important in life in general. And in my opinion, if you ask me what is most important, is people, health. Archaeology, though, when you cover up that need of securing the health and the safety of people, could become a tool to reconnect communities, to reconnect people with their past, to really understand their past, and to rewrite the wrongdoings, or not to rewrite, but to bring forward wrongdoings, bring forward justice if that's needed. But that's not a priority. And I think we have to really understand that yes, archaeological sites may be destructed, may be destroyed, but they're not the priority right now. If we don't secure first, let's say, the well-being of people, then archaeology will never be a tool to help further construct a society or further strengthen a society in real life. So I would say, is it useful? Yes, it is useful once we have dealt with the basics. So, and I really personally, I really get very upset, if I could use that word, when
Of
people
course.
talk about the destruction of archaeological sites, not only from war, but also from climate change, while we really don't consider, as archaeologists, we are, for instance, contributing to the climate change because we have a very good carbon footprint as archaeologists with all the traveling we do. I mean, it's a reality. And we don't discuss this. We don't say, okay, which sites could I access by train, for instance? Or which sites perhaps we could find a way for finding people locally to do the work instead of me going and taking photos and having to have a footprint of I don't know how much in order just to take a couple of photos or doing a photogrammetry. So there's a lot of things that we talk about, for instance, destruction from war or from climate change, which are like that's the two hot issues right now. But we are part of that. And since we are a luxury, which I really believe we are a luxury, we really forget that we really need to become a tool and forget that part of doing whatever we've been doing all these years. We really need to change our approach in order to continue to be useful. We've been so far very useful in some way because there has been that luxury in terms of budget and interest, but I don't think we're going to have that anymore in the coming years. It's not a pessimistic view. I think it's a challenge that will make us adapt and become more realistic as people.
Oh yeah,
This is
absolutely.
a thinking during the PhD writing, so
Oh
maybe
yeah.
it's me.
I was just about to say this has been the easiest job I have to do in my life. You are going on. You're moving the subject forward. This is amazing. But I honestly couldn't have put it better myself. I completely agree that if people are in danger and lives are in danger, the last thing we should care about is if a city or an ancient monument has fallen down. There's other important things. Again, though, I agree that after we've secured human life and we've secured human rights, which
Exactly.
we live in a world where people don't seem to care about human rights, which is ridiculous. Um, then yes, archaeology can become a wonderful tool of shaping an identity, of bringing people together, of so many things. And going back to not Amathus, but in Cyprus in general, a country where the matter of identity and who we are, who are we? It's a question that really can be answered in Cyprus, because Cypriots, since we talk about Amathus, if you ask a Cypriot, what does it mean to be Cypriot?
You
It's
can
a
have
difficult
different
question. They
answers.
have so many different answers. So yes, archaeology can really shape that identity and bring people together instead of tearing them apart and talking about my monuments and your monuments and nobody else, whatever else monuments. Uh, then the second thing I wanted to say, which I found very amusing, is that this is a callback to the first episode, which we did with Morris. Which, if you haven't checked it out, go check it out. Where
Okay.
Morris also talks about climate change, because Morris also works in harbors, and he taught me of how much harbors make him think about climate change, about how nature doesn't care about us, doesn't care how lavish our harbor is, how big it is, how big our empire is, how much money do we have. If the harbor is sunken, the harbor is sunken. You can't stop it, no matter how much money you have. And I think it's wonderful to see that both of you kind of working on harbors and think about climate change, because I know that both of you have actively worked in the harbors and came in, I don't know, in contact with nature, I may say, and you saw with your eyes the results of nature upon human structure.
Well, it shows you that no matter how much you think and well plan, nature will always win over humanity. And that's also a good reminder of, again, of what we're going through right now, that we could become the most innovative civilization as a humanity, but we'll always have a better, let's say, opponent, which is nature, and we forget about its existence.
Oh
And
yes.
it's something harbors and not only harbors, I think all archaeological sites. And that's why, again, when we are in times of crisis, yes, archaeology should not, or let's say the protection of archaeological sites should not, of course, considered as a priority, in my opinion, or should not be the first thing to be discussed on the table. But as archaeologists, that process of thinking, of understanding that there is something bigger than us, which is nature. Some people call it a god, but let's call it nature for neutrality.
Right, right.
It's something that really shows us that that there is change, constant change. That no matter what, everything will change, and no matter how hard we try, things are changing, and no matter how well we think that we've done something, it's going to be destroyed. It's going to change. It's going to be altered, and that is, I think, that is where also in times of crisis, like we're living right now, where archaeology again should not be considered a priority, then what we do as archaeologists, we just sit back and say, well, we're not a priority anymore, so let's go on holiday.
Oh,
It
nice, nice. Yes.
what do we do next? What do we do then? And I think that's when we should become part of that solution. We should become part of that discussion of prioritizing safety, human rights, health. And that is something that we are lacking as archaeologists. We are very much in our own little luxurious part of the world. We do our thing and we don't really interact with the reality. Now, there are people who are really going into that way, in that path, and that's super. But we are more on a theoretical basis, I feel, from my own personal experience. Maybe I'm not aware of things yet, fully aware. So sorry if some people are doing something and I'm not aware of. I will find out for sure in the future. But I think we really should be actors in the field. We don't do archaeological fieldwork just to collect data and then just go back home in our office in the library and do our research. We need to be part of the society. And we don't do I mean, there is a lot in the Eastern Mediterranean. I find that idea that when you do archaeological work, you don't share photos, you don't talk with people. There are even laws in some countries, for instance in Greece, even I think in Cyprus, where you can't really share some photos and things, which for reasons of protection, etc., or rights, which I understand. But these are having an impact. I don't know if you agree with me, but I think there is an impact because we're creating a wall which makes archaeology totally inaccessible and not part of the discussion. Because, as you said, harbors, which we're currently, and any archaeological sites, are hubs of change through time. And we really need to show that things change, people change, landscape change, and the change is not always bad, it's also good. Sometimes it's bad and we need to explain why it's bad, and people can learn from that. And we really need to become actors in that part of sharing and educating people, not one day as an open day because we have to and because it's in the UNESCO convention that we need to disseminate, but we really have to take it as our mission. This is what we do, and not just for the sake of ticking a box. I don't know if you agree with me. Let me know what you think.
So it's kind of a meta answer, but we are in a studio, let's say, doing kind of exactly what you're talking about, being advocates of change. And the whole reason we started this is because we really wanted, or I really wanted, I don't know how many people wanted it. I wanted the early career researchers in, this is for maritime archaeology, of course, but this can apply to all archaeologists, to
Yes.
actually give them a kind of platform, a kind of voice to speak about the issues that, if you ask, maybe this is not to spread hate or anything, but maybe if you ask an archaeology professor in some university, that they maybe not have the energy or the enthusiasm. I'm not saying that they're not doing it or I want to spread shade over anybody, but they may not have the enthusiasm and the energy and the ideas to actually be advocates for that change, to actually bring this conversation forward and not choose to hide away from the problems. Because this is exactly what archaeology is. We uncover the ruins of the past, we uncover the problems and we're talking about them. So if we choose to hide away the problems and, as you said, live in our beautiful, beautiful libraries and offices and just collect ceramics and talk about them, and for example, archaeology in the age of globalization, as you said in the beginning of this episode about Honor Frost funding people from the Eastern Mediterranean to do research on Eastern Mediterranean. If I, for example, choose to go to Mexico and pick up a bunch of stuff, archaeology related stuff, but I choose not to see any of the problems that's going on in Mexico and just go pick my stuff and leave, then have I really fulfilled my mission as an archaeologist? Should we talk about archaeologists having not only a responsibility of taking care of antiquities, a responsibility of preserving the antiquity, as we say so often. Our job is to protect and preserve and
Mhm.
publish antiquities. Maybe archaeologists, the scientists, as we like to call ourselves, who study humans. That's the core of it. We study
Yeah.
humans of the past through their material evidence, should talk about how today's problems can be solved, or how can we advocate for the problems and talk about them and bring them forward. And of course, it's wonderful to talk about XYZ ceramic and how nicely they're decorated and how good they look, but what's the end? What's the legacy we're leaving behind? What's the
Mhm.
imprint we want to leave in the world? And you're absolutely right in something else as well, that nowadays, being a PhD student myself and talking to a lot of PhD students and knowing a bunch of people that went through the process of applying for a PhD and trying to get into a PhD program, that they all are feeling forced to undertake fieldwork. They feel that their project will be undervalued if there's not a part of it that says, I will fly to XYZ location, and, as you said, take the pictures for myself, because it doesn't look very nice if I use the picture Judith took. I need to go take my own pictures and put them in my PhD because I'm doing my own research. So you pointed a bunch of important things. I felt the need to address them all one by one. I don't know if I did, if I did them justice, but yes, you're absolutely right. And this podcast is partly, what is it about? What is it about? To be advocates for that change and to bring that energy forward and talk about it, initiate a conversation.
But I really haven't answered yet the question of how practically we're doing, because I could have sounded very judgmental earlier where I said people are getting into that path, but they are very much into theory or
Mhm.
legislation, let's say. Um, but how we do that practically.
Okay,
So
how do
I haven't really figured that out, and I think having that question in mind is a good start. And I really hope in the future I'll be able to give you an answer on that, or first of all to myself,
Mm.
and then to others who may ask me that question of how we could become really part of the solution. I mean, now archaeology is very much being sold as an interdisciplinary science, which is great. And it's getting involved in different projects which have not something to do forcefully with an archaeological site, but with something else. And that's great. And that's a good start. But we really have to think as humans also when you see what's happening around the world, like what I do right now, how is it in some way contributing the community, contributing beyond me and the 5-10 people that are interested in this subject. And that's, I think, a challenge for every archaeologist to answer the question how my work could be something beyond my work.
Absolutely, yeah. And I don't think it's your job to find a solution to the problem, but it is our job to find a solution to the problem. As we've
Yeah,
spoken about
but
in
I
this episode a lot, is people are all about collaboration, all about working together and finding solutions. So I don't think it's one person's
no,
work to
but
find a solution.
I think it's also a work of retrospection,
Hmm.
like questioning yourself. So I think by starting that, it's a good start, and then by finding like-minded people to really start building up ideas, practical ideas that we could do and apply in reality in our fieldwork, in our daily life as archaeologists. And
Oh yeah, and as Sam would say, it's we may not be able to change the world, but we can live it better than what we found it. Right?
I agree with that. I mean, we are we are the next generation, and sometimes things are very dark, and it's and they look like it. I really believe we should name things as they are. They are dark, but as you said, we have the energy, as you said earlier. We have that inspiration, that drive, and we can make things live a much better livable. So, and I'm confident on that. We will find a way to do that. Don't know how yet, but we will.
Absolutely, yes. And this is a wonderful time on that high note to say a big, big, big thank you for being here, for sharing your thoughts and your research and your worries. I can really, I think you can hear in her voice the passion in which she says things and how much she believes in them. And it's wonderful to see people like you believing in change and in bringing change to the world.
We are living in change.
Oh yes,
It's
absolutely.
happening.
It's happening. It's happening. Absolutely. So this has been wonderful, and this is another episode of Mare coming to an end. Do you have any final remarks that you want to mention before we close?
Well, I would like to thank you because
Ooh.
it's really. I mean, I've said that to you, but I think people should know that it was your idea, the podcast, and when you joined Mare, you were very enthusiastic. But myself, I was not expecting this enthusiasm to become this, and it's really beautiful to see young people that they are sharing the enthusiasm that I feel, and putting it into action. And I think this is one of the actions that perhaps as archaeologists we should become more comfortable with, to talking in a more chilled, cool space about what we do, about what we think, and not like forget about conferences and very serious scientific discussions, because we really need to open up. And I think podcasts are a good start. So
Oh yeah.
kudos to you, George.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. Let's hope then that this podcast might create something. Maybe a roundtable discussion about climate change and archaeology and how we can limit our carbon footprint or anything similar. We're open to ideas and collaborations. Find us at Mare. Thank you. Thank you so much. Bye.